Excuse me for interrupting. I was just thinking that even though the argument that we hear often is that among those top earners are small businessmen and women who create jobs.
Well, unfortunately, that is a very misleading statement. Sure, there are some small businesses in those top 2 income brackets, but the reality is that only about 2 to 3% of all small business filings every tax year are in the top 2 the top 2 income tax brackets. So we're really talking about 98% of small business filings would not be affected by allowing the Bush tax cuts for the top 2 income tax brackets to expire on schedule.
The people you hit the hardest at $250,000 are small businesses. The people who hire the most people in America are small businesses.
And now on to Newt Gingrich, the man who did such a great job in running America back in the 90s that he wants a second chance in this decade. Newt, if you do to us now what you did to us then, we're going to be in big trouble. But Newt Gingrich makes $5 million a year from his punditry, which means that he'll get an extra $250,000 a year. An extra $250,000 a year from the Bush tax cuts being extended.
This is it right here. Half of the filers over $250,000 will be small businesses.
And now let's go on to the big cheese. George W. Bush himself, the man who got us into 2 endless wars, the man who brought us to the brink of national bankruptcy, the man who gave us $4 a gallon gasoline. George W. Bush makes a cool $4.2 million a year, according to Newsweek. That means that extending the Bush tax cuts for George Bush means an extra $187,000 in his pocket every single year.
Only 3% of small business owners have incomes over $250,000 and would be affected in any event.
So obviously, the top 3% have half of the gross income for those companies that we would term small businesses.
There's been too much of this kind of weird sense of, you know what, let's just try to parse the differences here. No, these differences are pretty darn big. Yeah. They want tax cuts for billionaires. We don't. They want to leave the unemployed out there hanging dry. Most American people and the Democrats don't.
All that money that the Bush tax cuts are charging us, that could create jobs for 3 million Americans a year. A $30,000 job, a fair wage for fair work, a dignified wage for dignified work, and a way to revive our economy in America. I think that's a better idea than stuffing even more money into the pockets of the rich.
All right, lastly, if you were involved in this administration in an advisory capacity or whatever, what would you be saying to them right now? What do they have to do at all costs?
I did spend a few years in the White House, as you know, and I would take the president behind his desk. I would open the upper left-hand drawer and say, Mr. President, that's where they keep the veto pen. You haven't used it. Get it out, and if they send you a bill that's got tax cuts for the rich in it, veto it. Take a stand and bring some discipline back to this country. If we're going to give tax breaks with Uncle Sam's credit card to the top 2% so they can go to Tiffany's and buy some more jewelry, where are we? We're lost.
If it seems like a no-brainer, our fifth story tonight should remove all doubt. A Countdown special report, the reality behind the Republican argument made by House Republican leader John Boehner and others that tax cuts for the rich are simply tax cuts for small businesses whose owners report their business earnings on their individual personal income tax returns. House Democrats have pushed back that some of those supposedly small businesses are actually big businesses. And after the White House identified the right-wing billionaire Koch brothers as being among those ranks, the Koch brothers are just the tip of a $500 billion iceberg. A variety of sources, including court documents, confirm that when Republicans talk about the small businesses they're trying to help with their tax cut, they're actually talking about some of the biggest companies in the world and some of the richest people in this country. Mr. Boehner admitting this summer that his tax cuts only benefit 3% of so-called small businesses. So how small can that top 3% be when it accounts for half of all small business income?
Only 3% of those small business people, you keep talking about all the small business people that are going to get taxed, only 3% would be affected by that. Or do you quarrel with that figure? Is that a right figure or a wrong figure?
Well, it may be 3%, but it's half of small business income because obviously the top 3% have half of the gross income for those companies that we would term small businesses.
So how do they decide which companies they would term small businesses? H&R Block told Politico it has 1.5 million small business clients, but extending the Bush tax cuts for the rich would benefit fewer than 0.5% of them. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, fewer than 750,000 people, 0.25% of the country, would be affected by the top rate. So how small can this top 3% of small businesses be if they make half the small business money?
And let's remember the context back then.
Dave Camp knows. He is the ranking Republican member on the House Ways and Means Committee. To him, the definition of small business is a footnote. Literally. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, 94% of all U.S. businesses in 2007 were S corporations, partnerships, or sole proprietorships, pass-through business types commonly used by small businesses. They call them pass-through companies because they file no taxes, passing through profits to the owners who report them on their individual tax returns instead. In short, they are considered small, not because they have a small payroll, but because they have a small number of owners. It's not the income that's small. It's not the number of employees that's small. It's just the total number of owners that's small. In the case of S-Corps, up to 100 owners.
My colleagues and I have been listening.
When politicians talk about small businesses, they are including any company that pays taxes as a pass-through. House Democrats last week identified 3 limited partnerships that file as pass-throughs: a pipeline company called Enterprise, the Wall Street firm Kohlberg, Kravis & Roberts, and the accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. The Koch brothers' own website lists partnership after partnership after partnership that make up a small business empire of 70,000 employees. According to the Washington Post, more than 1 million people who reported at least $200,000 in income in 2008 were partnerships and S-corps. The richer you are, the more likely you are to call yourself a small business that way. 89% of Americans who make more than $10 million a year filed as a partnership or as an S-corp. In 2008, more than 500,000 of these supposed small businesses had more than $1 million in assets. In 2005, almost 20,000 of them had annual receipts of more than $50 million. But if you want to know which companies these are, you are out of luck, because individual tax filings are not public record. Still, some have revealed themselves. The S-Corp Association lobbying group is chaired by an executive of the Hillman Company, a small business founded by a billionaire. The S-Corp Group president is from Venn Strategies, a small business whose chief operating officer is a former special assistant to President Bush, whose president used to work for Senate Leader Reid. Directors of the S-Corp Group come from Farrell Gas, which provides propane and propane accessories with a small business touch to 1 million customers. A small business. Coors Tech, North America's largest maker of technical ceramics, a small business founded by Adolf Coors. A small business. The Dead River Company, a small business with 1,200 employees, $500 million in annual revenue, and commercial real estate valued at $300 million. A small business. And a small business called McElhaney. The McElhaney family selling their Tabasco brand pepper sauce out of their kitchen to 160 countries. A small business.
But aren't you kind of holding the tax cuts for the lower income people, the people making less than $250,000 hostage, so you can give those tax cuts to the upper brackets? I mean, there are a lot more people below those top brackets than are in than those upper brackets. Why wouldn't you want to do something for those folks?
I want to do something for all Americans who pay taxes.
The man with the cigar, Rush Limbaugh, doesn't he look happy? According to Newsweek, he makes $58.7 million a year, and extending the Bush tax cuts for the rich will mean that he'll have another $2.7 million.
The Boston Globe revealed in 2007 that Fidelity Investments was becoming an S-Corp, a move that saved this small business hundreds of millions of dollars. Similar to how a scrappy little newspaper called the Tribune, as in the Chicago Tribune, made an extra $1.9 billion by converting to S-Corp status in 2008.
You don't want to punish these people at a time when you have a weak economy. Well, we need them to reinvest in their business.
Damn near 42 million Americans are on food stamps. And where are the Republicans? John Boehner is asking, well, where are the jobs? And big business is wasting billions of dollars on themselves. According to the Washington Post, large companies like Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, PepsiCo, and others, well, they're using their massive profits buying back shares instead of investing capital for job creation in this country. And who's paying the price for all of this? The American worker. Large companies have purchased, here are the numbers, $273 billion of their own shares this year. And my friends, that is 5 times as much as compared to this time last year.
As tax reporter David K. Johnston figured out, other companies get revealed as S-Corps when their filings become evidence in tax trials. That's how he identified one of the biggest small businesses in the world. Bechtel, a small business that builds airports, seaports, railroads, oil refineries, nuclear power plants. But back when it was just ye old Bechtel shoppy, they built the Hoover Dam. And today, 49,000 employees, $31 billion in revenue, the world's #1 engineering and construction firm, a small business. Companies aside, who are the actual people who would benefit from the Republican tax cut for the richest small businesses? Him, for one. Bloomberg News reports the president and other big authors and actors and celebrities, even hedge fund managers, file as S-Corps to save on taxes. Senator John McCain knows about S-Corps.
Small businesses are the job generator of America.
Mrs. John McCain filed as an S-Corp back in 2006, a small business owner who owns a massive beer distributorship and reported income of more than $6 million. And then there's small businessman Philip Anschutz, a small businessman who gave $30,000 to the Senate Republican Campaign Committee last year and $15,000 to the House. On top of his family's more than $500,000 to Republicans overall. Mr. Anschutz owns at least a part of more than 100 small businesses. Small railroads, small oil companies, small sports stadiums, small arenas, a small national movie theater chain, a small half of small Major League small soccer, the L.A. Kings, the L.A. Lakers. His small business entertainment company likes to clean out the old garage now and again to put on small shows by Bette Midler and Cher. Mr. Anschutz even owns small newspapers, including the Weekly Standard. Countdown has even identified one S-Corp owner whose reclusive founder and chairman actually works out of these very NBC headquarters in New York. Hi. Technically, I'm a small business.
Let's make all the current tax rates permanent, and then let's start to work from there toward putting in place the kind of policies that'll really get this economy moving again. I think it's fair to say if the current tax rates were enough to create jobs and generate economic growth, we'd have a growing economy. It's not working now.